Okay. Can you all hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. It gives all of us at BD Powers great pleasure to bring you an afternoon of baseball in January. In 2011, John Thorn became the official historian for Major League Baseball, and he presented his first hot stove league in person at BD Powers to an overflowing crowd of knowledgeable baseball enthusiasts. It became an annual event, only interrupted by COVID, but we're back today by Zoom. John is an author of several books on baseball history and served as a consultant for Ken Burns, a documentary in 1994 called Baseball. He is a brilliant historian and raconteur, as many of you know or will find out. So just so you know, we are recording today, and it will be entered on our website that you could listen to it at another time. Just so you know, the Friends of BD Powers, we are a nonprofit 501c3, and we would always appreciate any of your donations, no matter how much. And you can do that by visiting our website. It's spelled BEATTIEPOWERS.org. If you see that, you just scroll down on the homepage to a donate button at the bottom, and that will give you information on how to donate. So that is BEATTIE, BEATTIE, powers.org. Enough of the begging, okay? And now would you please welcome our friend John Thorn, and thank you, John, for doing this.
Of course, Bob, it is a tradition around here. And
it is.
And I'm glad to take part. So as per previous, I've prepared a 10 or 11-minute talk. And then we will go to the Q&A. If I have not deterred people with my talk, then the Q&A tends to be the more interesting portion of the session. So here we go. Howdy to my friends, local and far-flung. In years past, I have bent your ears in person with an annual Hot Stove League talk. It is always launched with a 10-minute essay about whatever had been on my mind, followed by a question and answer session about whatever may have been on your mind. When we get to the Q&A session, do not hesitate to ask me anything at all. It need not reference the subject of today's talk. For this year's topic, I am indebted to my wife, not much of a fan, who asked in all innocence whether the popularity of the quadrennial World Baseball Classic might one day surpass that of soccer's World Cup. We'll get to that a bit later. So let's start with how baseball became a beacon to all of America and, like the Statue of Liberty, the world.
Can we ask everyone to mute? Mute.
That will help the bandwidth issue.
Definitely.
Once regarded as the most resistant to change of our major sports, baseball has moved from the national pastime toward MLB hopes, the international pastime. Slowly, since the Brooklyn Dodgers welcomed Jackie Robinson in 1947, baseball has made good on its 19th century brainstorm that its game was so good that it ought to be shared with everyone, and in time, adopted by them. Two teams of baseballists went to England in midsummer of 1874, bringing the baby back home all grown up. And another tour spanned the globe in the off-season between 1888 and 1889. Other notable overseas adventures took All-Stars to Europe, Asia, and the Caribbean. And of course, all the while, segregated black baseball was played in many Hispanic nations. In this past Hot Stove League season, chatter has centered on such names as Ohtani, Soto, Yamamoto, and Acuna, while organized baseball continues to shed light upon even the dark corners of its own history, notably the former exclusion of Black and Asian players on account of skin color. As a point of pride, I offer that I have long been involved with MLB's recognition of the Negro Leagues of 1920 through 1948 as equivalent major leagues, with inclusion of those records in the official database. I believe that we will make a formal release of the first version of those records before this year is out. International MLB games began in 1996 when the Mets and Padres traveled to play a 3-game series in Monterrey, Mexico. In 2024, we will play regular season games in Seoul, in London, in Mexico City, and on and around Juneteenth, in special recognition of the Negro Leagues, Birmingham, Alabama, where Willie Mays began his career as a 17-year-old. Also, the Red Sox will square off against the Rays in a spring training series in Santo Domingo, capital of the Dominican Republic, which since Ozzie Virgil in 1956 has sent 887 additional players into MLB's ranks, a total unsurpassed in MLB history by any foreign nation. This is an amazing total, although it's worth highlighting, too, the influx of 76 players from the Nippon Professional Baseball League since the debut of Masanori Murakami in 1964. Last year, Shohei Ohtani won the Most Valuable Player award in the American League while inspiring comparisons with Babe Ruth. The National League's MVP was Ronald Acuna Jr., born in Venezuela. In its dedication to present the best quality of play, MLB has welcomed players from more than 50 nations. Before I was born in 1947, matters of race, creed, national origin, ethnicity, and gender got in the way of fielding the very best. Today, there are no rules, overt or covert, barring anyone from taking part. Gender seems to be the last frontier, and I hope that I live long enough to see a woman play in Major League Baseball. Drawing from ever wider pools of talent, our game has seen an advance in the average level of skill in each generation that is undeniable, even if it may be hard to pinpoint without the use of advanced statistics. Here is not the place for that, so consider this old-timer's contention that fielding plays were visible every day last year that were not made at any time in the 1950s. Today's game is better because its players are better. As a game emphasizing individual accomplishment within the context of unified effort, baseball offers a fine model of how one might become part of the team, how an outsider might be an American. To the tempest-tossed of Europe like me, born to Holocaust survivors in a displaced persons camp in occupied Germany, baseball seemed fair. Effort would be rewarded no matter where you came from or the color of your skin. Baseball was not exactly a melting pot, that model of American inclusion in which differences of birth or origin might merge and then disappear. Baseball accepted nominal outsiders as they were. Jews did not have to be Christian or blacks to be white. Although the baseball playing population of African Americans in the major leagues has diminished from a high of, in some published estimates, 28% in the late 1960s, actually it peaked near 20% in 1975, to perhaps 8% today, More people of color play the game in the major leagues than have ever done so before. If you count all dark-skinned people, whatever their nation of origin, the number in organized baseball is nearing 40% today, and the upward trend is inexorable. America is a nation of nations, and for me and millions of others, baseball is its sport of choice. And yet, football, not the NFL's game, is the world's game. Requiring no equipment beyond the ball, it was played before there were bats or bases or wickets. Football is territorial, tends to be low scoring, and its nuances are appreciated by players, coaches, and fans, if not by me. In the 18th century, baseball was played in England by young people of both sexes, and the ball was struck with the hand. It was a stop-action sport even once the bat came into play. Unlike football, not a continuous one. Like cricket, this made it possible to keep track of events and, over time, gambling over minute aspects of play. The orderliness of baseball, when added to its alacrity when compared with cricket, has appealed to a range of nations in which soccer is also played. Every 4 years or so, league play in baseball separates into national teams in the World Baseball Classic. Patriotism swells, as it does for the World Cup or the Quadrennial Olympics, even if the competitive quality of play is thus diminished. So, to answer the lovely misses, will the World Baseball Classic one day grip fans the way that the World Cup does? No, and more's the pity. Thanks for enduring my talk, and let's open things up, and you may ask whatever you like related to the talk or other things.
John, we'd like to have a little control. Maybe if people could click raise hand and we could take people in order. Is that okay with you?
Everything is okay with me.
Okay.
I can't see the raised hand.
Raised hand is under reactions or
The reactions.
under the more button.
What was the other button?
More, maybe under the more.
I don't have either one of those.
Well, who is that? Can go far.
Richard Muggio.
Richard, would
It's Richard Muggio.
first, then John, can you answer Richard's question or address his comment?
Sure, let's go.
My question is, as Major League Baseball's official historian, what responsibilities or duties do you have? There's a certain amount of articles you must produce or hours of research. What do you do as Major League Baseball's official historian?
Well, the lovely thing about
keep
this,
improving.
the lovely thing about this gig is that I have been asked to be me, which is something I know how to do. And if I were not to be baseball's official historian, my very next day would be conducted in the same manner. I would do some research. I would respond to queries. I would participate in social media. And perhaps no longer would I have to be so responsive to colleagues within MLB, whether it's legal or marketing or public relations. I am something of a failsafe to prevent Major League Baseball from making a mistake about its own past. And we have very many young people working for MLB who may not be able to tell you why the 60-game season of 1877 and 1878, when combined with the 60-game season of 2020, gave impetus to the decision to embrace the Negro League statistical records. So it's the backdrop, the fail-safe, and of course I do write this blog at ourgame.mlblogs.com, and I've written an essay a week or more probably 75 essays a month, 75 essays a year, rather, since 2011. So millions of words are there all about baseball history. Is that part of my job definition as delivered to me by the commissioner? No, but it's the thing I think I ought to do.
Thank you.
Next question from John Selzer. If you'd unmute, John, you can, yeah.
Oh, okay. I put it in the query
You will.
because well, now I'm kind of tongue-tied because I'm talking to John Thorn. Oh my God. John, you mentioned the
John,
game.
it's just folks over here, and I'm delighted to be talking with you.
Actually, my name is going to be Jack more officially, but anyway.
So, Jack, we have corresponded in the past, have we not?
You were very generous to comment many years ago on something. I'm just amazed that you can recall that. That's a true historian at work. You know, you mentioned that game that's scheduled for Birmingham next summer.
Yep.
But I haven't been able to locate tickets, and a spy of mine said that maybe the game was going to be put off for a year. I was wondering if Rickwood Field is not ready, or do you know anything about that?
I do not. If from my perspective, it's full steam ahead. Now, if there are developments about the Rickwood Field or about MLB's intentions to play there that I'm unaware of, your source may be better than mine, but it will come as news to me if, in fact, we have to punt for a year. Pardon the borrowing of a metaphor from that other sports league.
And next, I see Dominic.
Yeah, John, thank you for spending some time with us today.
My
And
pleasure.
yeah, and relative to your talk about Major League Baseball's desire to spread the game throughout the world, do you see that as any relationship in terms of possible expansion of Major League franchises, whether they'd be here in this country or otherwise?
Well, there has been talk for decades now of expansion into Mexico City. And there are logistical complications, there are altitude complications, but we seem to have conquered those with the Colorado Rockies and the altitude in Denver. So given the vagaries of air travel, if we were to place a franchise in London or Paris, it would seem to me that we would have to have the equivalent of the old-fashioned 15 to 20 game road trip. We used to have those things where you'd play 4 or 5 games in a city, then move on to another city. And in order to diminish air traffic, I think we would probably have to rejigger the schedule, and perhaps we'd have to go to 32 teams rather than 30 and have 8-team leagues. The idea of 8 4-team leagues, which is appealing to some from a competitive standpoint, I think is absurd, but I don't make policy, I follow it.
Thank you.
Our next question is from David.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can indeed.
Okay. Could you compare and contrast what is going on in Oakland vis-a-vis their move supposedly to Vegas to, for example, what happened in New York City during the 1950s regarding the move of the Giants and Dodgers? Is it all financials, or is there something more going on?
Well, it's financial, of course. The owner of the A's feels he's not making enough return in Oakland, and Vegas is the Golden Interior West. Now, I was asked a question in email just last night by Ken Rosenthal, who's a pal. And what he asked was if there is a plan for the A's to play some of their games in Oakland and some of their games in Vegas in the same calendar year, in the same MLB playing season. Is there any precedent for such a thing? And I scratched my head and thought, well, maybe 1877, when Hartford, which played all of its home games in Brooklyn that year, returned home to Hartford to play one game. That is the best parallel I can think of. There are others, like when the Yankees renovated their stadium and had to play 1974 and 75 at Shea, or when the Dodgers in their last 2 years in Brooklyn played, I think, 7 games in Jersey City. But the best parallel that I can think of is the Hartford one. And yes, it's a very long time ago, and yes, it was a singular thing. But MLB is ruled by precedent, and it's always comforting to do something you've once done before. So do I think there is more going on than the pursuit of the almighty dollar? No, I don't think so.
Our next question comes from Pat. Pat, you need to unmute.
Yeah, my husband Mark is
sitting next door.
Hey, Pat, hey, Mark.
All right. John, my question is really more of a concern about where baseball is going, the kind of the feel of the game. Every couple of years, I take out the first episode of the classic Ken Burns documentary. And I like to watch that first episode because it lays a groundwork for where baseball came from. And it seems to me that baseball is best as a narrative, as the way the game unfolds, even watching even experiencing the game as a narrative. So I'm concerned that the narrative of baseball has changed because of all of the numbers, of all of the percentages, all of the algorithms, as we might say, that lends itself, I'm thinking, more towards betting and things of that nature. And at the same time, I see baseball moving closer and closer commercially to betting. I mean, it's right out there as you watch the game. They're talking about betting and things like that. I am very concerned, and I'm thinking about the hypocrisy of all of this. And I'm not a big fan of what's his name getting into the Hall of Fame, but it just seems hypocritical to me that baseball is moving in that direction. Do you have any?
If I may take a stab at what I think is your question.
Yeah,
and
it's a concern. It's a concern. Okay.
Is baseball losing its way? Is the game on the field somehow worse than the game we saw when we were 12? And has gambling overtaken the game along with analytics? I will say that analytics are a new feature. And while we've had analytical approaches to the game ever since F.C. Lane and Ernie Lanigan in the 1910s, what we have seen lately via the computer in particular, which is a societal innovation, not merely for baseball, is that gambling has returned to baseball. Gambling was essential to the rise of the game from the level of an informal game played by boys to a game worthy of the attention of adult spectators. Why would adult spectators watch this thing in the 1860s, in the 1870s? because they had placed a bet. So if baseball's betting had gone underground through pools and barroom activity, and had taken a back seat to the point spread in basketball or a point spread in football, it is now back, perhaps from your perspective, with a vengeance. But for me, as a historian, I see it as a return to its roots. And it is interesting to me, societally and psychologically. Is the game better? And I think I said during my talk that the game on the field is better with every generation. It doesn't mean that we didn't have big stars in the 1920s or 30s or even in the 1880s and 90s. We've always had stars who have ascended beyond the level of the average level of skill. I think the game is better on the field. If it's not as good off the field, to people with gray hair like myself and you two, then I would suggest that a longing for the recapture of one's youth may have more to do with this perspective than anything factual about the game of baseball.
Very good answer. Very good answer. But what about the narrative of the game as it goes on TV or radio and things like that? I believe that you just don't get a story of the game as you did in the older day.
I think Red Barber and Mel Allen are not springing back to life, nor is Vin Scully. And if our announcers are not as wordsmith capable as their predecessors, then we can write to their networks and complain and say, Joe Buck, you need to go. But this is the game we have. And I will say that despite my advanced years, I like the game today as much as I've ever liked it.
I like the game too. Thank you, John.
Of course.
Our next question comes from Randy.
Unmute myself.
There you go. Hey, Randy.
Okay. Hi, John. So I have a couple of things that were on both sides. And for those of you, who don't know me, besides having been a longtime minor and Major League Baseball executive, I have Larry Ritter on my mother's side as a relative and Arnold Rothstein as my cousin on the other side.
Impeccable, Randy.
So, and in fact, I just did a documentary from Israel about the Jewish mobsters from 100 years ago, with Arnold being the one, and all of the research where I hadn't realized how close he was with John McGraw at a pool hall with Christy Mathewson going back.
Pool hall and racetrack, yeah.
Well, the pool hall was actually in Herald Square, that he was the silent partner. That was partnered by Christy Mathewson and John McGraw. I mean, everything that was done, yes, it was. They were all betting. The thing that Pete Rose did that was such a problem is that he bet on his own games. And what was happening was when he did not bet on his team to win, he tipped off the other bettors as to how to bet.
Precisely. That was the nature of his gambling issue.
Right. If he had bet on his team to win every game, they wouldn't have had a problem the way they do now.
I think that's good, Randy.
Yeah. So regarding the blacks in baseball, now I started with 1978 Pirates, where they were trying to find another Roberto Clemente, and Branch Rickey III was my scouting director. I started well. I had 7 Latins on the team. What baseball hasn't really wanted to talk about is that they've been developing the issue of the Black players coming from the other countries because of economics. It was much cheaper. And what's been happening in the United States is that the African Americans, to play baseball with the equipment is much more costly than one basketball or one soccer ball.
And the cost of travel teams when you're 14.
The whole thing is ridiculous, which has created this problem because baseball found out how much cheaper it is to develop talent elsewhere. And that's a sociological issue to be discussed somewhere else.
Yes, but I would just interject, Randy.
Yeah,
that,
please.
that despite the less than admirable intentions behind exploitation, the outcome may be practically and societally good.
Oh, yes, it is, but we still have to figure out how to increase the ability for Americans to pursue the game when it's an
Agreed.
economic issue that's a barrier compared to the other sports.
Very good, Randy.
That's really my only point on that. But that brings me to the whole minor league issue, where I was speaking to a longtime fellow minor leaguer in management and owner who said that the rules now that Major League Baseball has bought the minor leagues, they are asking the clubs to meet standards that are so high without grandfathering minor league teams that have already spent a fortune for the previous rules of what the facilities must be. And he thinks there might be looking at a loss of 50 clubs from the 120.
Well, the height of minor league activity was in the post-war years,
Right.
1946 through 1949, and we're not going to return to 448 minor league clubs. And we're also probably not going to return to 200. But
to go with 50 because they've raised the standards to be so, and they're not supporting them economically to do that. And I think that's a mistake because too many of them don't understand how important minor league development is, because sabermetrics cannot handle heart, head, and stomach, and only scouts can, and only minor league coaching staffs, real and player development people can do that. And
I'm in favor of minor league development and sustenance. The idea that we can go shopping in the Japan Professional Baseball League and go shopping in the Dominican Republic in order to restock MLB rosters, at some point you're going to come to a bad place.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. So I don't know that MLB understands how skilled you have to be mentally as well as physically to be successful at the major league level. And that when you're on a college roster, you don't know what you're facing. One day you're facing a pitcher that's fantastic, the next day you're not, and it can psychologically ruin a hitter, and vice versa. I mean, the minor leagues are structured so carefully to make sure you're ready to face the competition at whatever level you're at. College can't do that. So you succeed despite it and not because of it.
You and I are on the same side of this. We have used the colleges as developmental leagues.
Yeah, I'm the college.
In the same way that the NBA and the NFL have looked to the colleges to develop players for them. And at the very top level, the superstars, yes, they're going to walk right into a starting position. But a lot of the mid-level stars at the collegiate level don't cut it in either the NBA or the NFL, or you'll have undrafted free agents ascending in those leagues in a way that they won't in baseball.
Yeah, I mean, baseball, you have to have the minor leagues because there's so many other intangibles that need time, and it's so much more skilled a game. So it's our own central baseball needs to understand that. And I wonder where the leadership is on the player development side in the commissioner's office.
I wish I could speak to that, but I can do no more, Randy, than say that you and I are on the same side of the issue.
Yes, to be discussed further amongst ourselves. But the thing to remember, one last thing, is that a college coach's job is to win to keep his job.
Of course.
In the minor leagues, your job is to develop. If you win, it's a byproduct, but it's not the purpose.
Excellent point.
Thank you. Our next questioner is Dixie.
Hello, John.
Hey, Dixie. Nice to see you.
Same here. Thank you for a wonderful January afternoon of baseball.
My pleasure entirely.
On a lighter vein, from the question just asked, do you have any comments positive or negative or maybe neutral on the latest Hall of Fame vote?
I do not, because frankly, who gets in and who stays out is beyond my level of concern. I don't get a vote. I'm not a member of the Baseball Writers Association. So I have been asked by the Baseball Hall of Fame to take part in its eras or Veterans Committee meetings, and I may be asked to do so again. But just as Randy was saying that the purpose of a college baseball coach is to get a job for next year, to stay hired, the purpose of the National Baseball Museum and the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown is to provoke argument in the off season and culminate with a selection process, which is followed by argument as well. And who's in, who's out, I think the last time I cared about this subject was Bobby Grich and Ron Santo.
Thank you.
Our next questioner is Ken Goldfarb.
Have to unmute.
You're good. Oh, click again one more time, Ken.
Oh, you're right.
There you go.
There we go. Sorry.
Okay,
John.
you're on board now.
Yeah, first of all, my name, somehow I misspelled my own name here. Goldfarb. But at any rate, I was wondering what your take was on the computerized strike zone, and is there a timetable that Major League Baseball has for it?
If there is a timetable, I would not be the first one they would tell. So I don't know that. I do prefer, from a philosophical standpoint, human intervention in the strike zone. I prefer umpires having a measure of independence. To the extent that you'll still have a home plate umpire to whom you can appeal a computerized strike zone decision, this seems to me to work very well for tennis, perhaps less well in the NBA and the NFL and the NHL. So there's going to be a shakedown cruise, and however it gets implemented at the Major League Baseball level, and it is certain that it will be, the computerized strike zone, the appeal system is going to be the key to fan acceptance.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments?
I have a question, but I can't get that question offhand.
Okay, who is talking?
Dick Maggio.
Okay, go for it, Dick.
John, in your presentation earlier, you mentioned that you might live to see a woman play baseball. I don't know much about women's sports. Do they have an opportunity to play baseball now, or is it limited to softball? What do you see happening there?
No, I think hardball for women is the game. I think softball, you have a lot of integrated male, female hardball teams where the coach will ask the proficient woman player to back off and go play softball. And I think
Really?
that's less the case now than it was 10 years ago. And there are pioneers in this area. And I know that Mark Durand is working on a documentary called Her Game. And it's about the hardball experiences of women since the 1870s, because this does go back. We have all female teams, the female New York Giants of 1912, 1913, headed by pitcher Ida Schnall. Now, were these were different from the burlesque shows of the 1880s with 50-foot base paths. These women could play, and women today can play. Now, is a woman likely to be a left fielder or a first baseman or a catcher? No, perhaps not. but a pitcher or a second baseman, that's the place to look for, that first pioneer at the major league level.
Thank you.
Our next question is from Rich.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, Rick.
Oh, great. Going back to your talk, I was interested in, has there ever been, prior to Jackie Robinson, a biracial player who passed for white and played in the majors?
Oh, well, this is a big story about which I've written rather a great deal. And yeah, Jimmy Claxton of the Oakland Oaks passed as Native American or part Native American, while in fact he was part African American. And he pitched in a couple of games, and he even got a Z-Nut baseball card, which is highly prized by collectors. And I believe this is 1911, 1912, 1913, in that period. But we have African American players in the 19th century. We had not only Welde Walker and Fleetwood Walker playing for Toledo, a major league club in the American Association of 1884, but we also had William Edward White, who to me is a fascinating character because he played one game for the Providence Grays at first base when Joe Start had broken a finger and was unable to play. And William White was a player for Brown University whose background is unique. His father was white. His mother was purchased as a slave. So the idea that biracial baseball players appeared in the major leagues before Jackie Robinson is a certainty. Charles Bumpus Jones, who threw a no-hitter in his first major league start, I think it was 1892, there's very good evidence that he was half black. So yeah, the answer to your question perhaps is not comprehensive, but Claxton is the place to start in terms of passing. Now, we also had Charlie Grant, who was a prominent Negro League player in the years before the start of the Negro Leagues in 1920. And he was in spring training with the New York Giants, being passed off as Chief Takahoma, again, half white and half African, half Native American. So the idea of passing your way into white society was the only way in, and it was accepted in a way that it would not be today.
Thank you.
Our next questioner is Dixie again.
Hello, John, again. As a researcher, I know there are thousands of people like me out there, and you too, who are searching millions of pages of newspapers that we can now do from our homes. I always wonder about, is there anything, I'm sure there is, but I'm wondering if there is anything left to find. What have you found recently that brought to your mind immediately, how come no one has found this before?
Yes, just last week, I was searching the pages of the New York Sunday Mercury, Porter's Spirit of the Times, and the New York Clipper to respond to a question that my friend David Block had, which is, what was the print run of that first 1860 Beatles dime baseball player, which was the first pocket preseason guide to the New York game? There had been one the previous year, 1859, the baseball pocket companion from Mayu and Baker, but the first for the New York game was the Beatle dime baseball player. And what we found in the process was not the print run, but what we found was the date of publication. It was the month of May, and we found advertisements for it dating back to May 18th, May 13th, and some other SABR members participated in this. Now, you can't get nerdier than this kind of activity. but it is a special joy. And when I post to Facebook or post to the 19th Century Group page on Facebook, I put on the header, "This is how old boys have fun," because it is great fun. And what can be better than finding something that nobody knew before?
I'm surprised David Block needed an answer to that question.
Yes, David Block is formidable, and but even the best of us, including you, Dixie, needed help sometimes.
Always.
Anyone else? Bob?
Cindy,
Yeah, Rick.
this is Dick Maggio. I hate the Ghost Runner, and I was wondering if there's any chance of ever being removed.
I think given the evolution of starting pitching as opposed to relief pitching, and the fact that the complete game has gone the way of the dodo, we are not going to see any impetus for extra inning games beyond the 12th. This is not going to return. So what we want to do is provide an entertainment that philosophically is not responsive to the clock. It's not 60 minutes. It's not 48 minutes. It's of unlimited duration. It can be I saw a 7-hour game in the World Series, Red Sox and Dodgers, 7 hours plus. But by then, but in the World Series, the Ghost Runner is gone. So in the regular season, in order to preserve a pitching staff, I believe you have got to keep games under 4 hours theoretically, and certainly under 12 innings. And the Ghost Runner is an impetus to scoring. And what you don't want to have happen is like the Mets and the Giants played 25 innings back in when Gaylord Perrier was a part of the Giants staff. That's not going to come back.
I don't know. I hate these things.
Last take. Going once. Going twice.
Well, we have run about an hour here, which is, I think, standard. And the fact that this is going to be recorded and put on the BD Powers site may mean that people will respond by social media by asking further questions, which I think is a great idea. And I will be looking at the BD Powers site, and I will be happy to respond to whatever queries may come in later days, weeks, and months. And thank you all for joining us, and I kick it back to Bob.
Many thanks. Many thanks, John. This was great. Thank you again. Every year.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Well,
I think I have analysis on this.
Go ahead.
My analysis is simply this.
What happened?
I'm going to shut this down now. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy.
my pleasure. Bye, Ken.
Bye-bye.